Washington can assemble an elite crop of offensive linemen in 2027.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, whatever that might be, please make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the show out a lot. Now, I got a loaded show coming at all you everydayers on this Friday, where I want to spend some time at the end talking about Washington women's basketball's awesome double overtime win against Maryland on the road. This team, you got to watch out for them. But I also want to spend some time talking recruiting. State of California is certainly going to be a top priority for Jedd Fisch and his coaching staff in the cycle. We'll get there a little bit later on. I want to throw some defensive names at you that maybe you've heard them before, maybe you haven't. We'll get there in a little bit, but I want to start on the offensive line, because this is just one of those positions in the Big Ten where you need to reload with an elite crop of guys on a year in, year out basis. And I feel like Washington has a great opportunity to do that in 2027. And one guy that I believe that starts with is 3-star offensive lineman DaJohn Yarborough from Basha High School down in Arizona. This is a dude that I've been really intrigued by. I remember when Washington offered him, it was just before the start of the season, like late July, early August of 2025. And I remember taking a look at his film and saying, oh, all right, this dude can certainly play. And he started to get more offers after moving from Minnesota down to Basha High School. And this is a guy where, as his recruitment continues to pick up, I think that Washington is certainly going to find themselves right in the mix for his services. When you look at the fact that it was great to see Jedd Fisch and Michael Switzer go take a visit to Basha High School to have a conversation with him. I'm sure they also spent some time with 4-star running back Noah Roberts. But the other thing with Yarborough is I'm very curious to see what his stock looks like over the course of this offseason, because he suffered a fractured ankle in the middle of his junior season. So curious to see where that might be and how healthy he is, because Washington certainly hasn't backed off their pursuit of him at all. So keep an eye on him. And as we kind of build out what Washington's ideal offensive line class looks like on this show, I think that he is a perfect fit for what the Huskies want to do at 6'5", 330 pounds. I think that he has the ability to play guard in terms of his size and his physicality, but if Washington wants to kick him out to tackle, I think that he would be certainly a more than adequate fit there as well. Somebody who I want to highlight, because we've talked about him several times on the show, and he's not moving to tackle because he's probably a pure center at the college level, is 3-star offensive lineman Reis Russell from Valor Christian High School in Colorado. This is a guy that Washington has been just in hot pursuit of since day one. And I really like, A, where they stand with him, and B, just how he has reciprocated that interest, where he was at several games as an unofficial visitor last fall. I know you everydayers know this, but it's worth rehashing, because in any offensive line discussion you want to have regarding Washington and the 2027 class, Reis Russell needs to be right there in the middle of it. And especially with Landon Hatchett moving on after the 2026 season, this is a guy who can come in and certainly compete to be a starting center very early on in his career. I don't know if it'd be as a true freshman, just because that is such a major adjustment to make, but this is a guy that Washington's coaching staff has shown a lot of belief in, and I just really like their standing with him. Another guy where I certainly like their standing with him, it's going to be really tough to keep him in the Pacific Northwest, as Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks took a trip to Puyallup High School to visit him not too long ago. That's 4-star offensive lineman Gecova Doyal, one of the top in-state guys who you everydayers know it, because we've talked about him on the show several times. I like where Washington sits with him. It was really nice to see him at several games and several practices throughout the course of the 2025 season. And as his recruitment continues on, I feel like this is somebody where, a lot like DaJohn Yarborough, I think he might wind up fitting a lot better at guard than he does tackle. But this is just one of those guys where, again, I like the fit at Washington in any way, shape, or form. And if you haven't taken a look at his film, I certainly recommend it, because he's one of those guys who, he seems like he could be a perfect fit in the Big Ten, where the leverage he gets, where he is certainly one of those guys where, even though he's listed at 6'3", 6'4". He plays by the standard of low man wins. He just gets great leverage. The way his feet move are so advanced for just where he's at in his career. And I'm so impressed every single time I turn on his film. And so I certainly believe that this is one of those guys where, as Washington makes a big push to keep some of these top prospects close to home, he is in the middle of all of those discussions. And as we get to spring practice and everything like that, he's someone who I would absolutely expect to be at several more spring practices and take an official visit to UW at some point. And if the Huskies wind up with him at the end of the day, I'm certainly not going to be shocked. Another guy who I would absolutely say that for, and I think is a bit of a sleeper at this point in time, where you go look at his On Threes 247 pages, he doesn't even have a ranking yet, but I think that Tye Kennedy could be a real sleeper as one of the best offensive linemen on the West Coast. And the fact that he's the son of UW legend Lincoln Kennedy certainly helps in this case. And as I was going through this class, there are a couple other names that I wanted to make sure I mentioned at the very end of like, oh, maybe this could be the fifth guy. I feel like 4 or 5 is going to be the right amount for Washington in this class up front. With a couple of guys leaving, you always have to prepare for maybe a transfer or two, because that's just the way college football works nowadays. And I feel like Tye Kennedy is one of those dudes who you go and you read any comments that he's made about Washington's. Oh yeah, I've been a fan since day one. Obviously, because my dad went there and everything like that. And to see him get an offer and to see Michael Switzer and this coaching staff really take a chance on him is awesome, because it's not even just that. When you go and you watch the film, it's very clear that he's an extremely talented prospect. And to get in early on a guy like that who has great ties to the program, I think that he's someone who would absolutely fit at Washington. And he's one of those dudes where if you grab him while he's still a little bit under the radar, he's someone who I fully believe could wind up being a high-end 3 or even a 4-star prospect by the time the cycle is said and done, because of his size and his frame. And one of the big reasons he's not ranked right now is because he's been limited by some injuries. So I believe that over the course of his senior season and even just the evaluation process leading up to it, he's a guy that can absolutely rise a lot, and I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on. Another one is one of the top offensive linemen in California, and that's 4-star offensive lineman Lincoln Maggio. He's another guy who Washington has absolutely been very, very interested in for a long time, and I think that as this recruiting cycle plays out, he's one of those guys where I think he's another true interior sort of dude, but another one of those guys where you just look at the size, the strength, the profile, everything that he brings to the table is exactly what the Huskies are looking for from their guards, and just having a deep, talented rotation at that position where, I mean, we've seen what some of these top teams around the Big Ten have been able to build up front in terms of size, caliber of prospect, everything like that. And I think Lincoln Maggio is a perfect just encapsulation of everything Washington is looking for along the interior of the offensive line. So he's another guy that I absolutely expect this program to be just kind of, I don't want to say a full court press for right now, because it's still really early, but I can tell you for sure that he's one of those guys that is certainly on the top of their board when you look at the visits they've taken to see him and everything like that. And he's somebody that I believe Washington will just continue to push for until it's all said and done. And a couple of honorable mentions that I wanted to make sure I threw at you. One of them is someone who I've mentioned on a couple of shows recently. It's 3-star offensive lineman Ben Lowther from Arizona. He's someone who recently decommitted from Stanford, and it seems like he's going to be a major riser over the spring and summer as well. I think that was one of the reasons he decided to back off on his commitment to Stanford, is because he's going to be receiving a lot of interest, and Washington has been in on him for a while. I know he took a visit to come up at some point during the season too, and just if that interest continues and is reciprocated, I absolutely believe he's someone who's Washington is going to try to push to get an official visit out of. And over the course of his senior year, as Washington also just continues to recruit the state of Arizona, he could wind up being a major building block as Jedd Fisch and his coaching staff to try to get more guys from down there to wind up here. One more guy that I want to mention is the top player in Colorado. That's 4-star offensive lineman Jackson Roper. Just another one of those dudes where, in the same vein as a lot of these other guys we talked about, right? Size, frame, it all works out really, really well. And like a couple of the other ones, I don't necessarily think he's one of those guys where Washington has been looking for a couple dudes to come in and start right away. We saw it with John Mills. We're expecting to see it now with Cody Green. And I think Jackson Roper might take a year or two to develop and add some weight and different things like that, but he has an elite frame. And I think that as he continues to just grow and gain acumen throughout the course of his senior season, this is another guy that Washington has been in on for a while and could certainly wind up just being one of their top targets throughout this entire process. You take any 5 of those guys, you throw them together, I think you would be able to come up with a tremendous offensive line class for the Huskies in 2027. So let's flip sides of the ball here and let's talk defense. Right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We've also got a message from our good friends over at Dewar. Dewar's denim and lifestyle apparel are engineered for movement and versatility. Whether you're on the go, traveling, lounging at home, or going to a nice dinner party, Dewar fits every occasion. I've been recommending Dewar to all my friends because these are my favorite jeans to wear for any occasion. I love the shirts that they have as well. I'm just cool and comfortable 24/7. And that's because Dewar invented the original performance denim. They give you the best of both worlds, combining classic jeanswear style with the kind of comfort and performance you get from athletic wear. They're designed to look great and stay comfortable all day long, all year round. It's time for you to experience the comfort of Dewar. I know you're going to love these. Pick up a pair for yourself or as an amazing gift. You can find Dewar at your local Seattle REI location or shop online at shopdewar.com/LockedOnSeattle. You'll get 15% off your first order. That's shopdeuer.com/LockedOnSeattle for 15% off. One more time, shopdewar.com/LockedOnSeattle. To all you everydayers out there, thank you so much for making Locked On Huskies your first watch or first listen of the day. And thank you again for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. And if you haven't already, go check out our new Everydayer Club. It's really cool. It gives you access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Huskies, and that's compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. And it also gives you an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of the show. I'm going to be hanging out in there, answering all kinds of questions, and there's also just so many other channels to check out. All your other favorite sports. There's a college football channel. Certainly need to check it out. Go to LockedOnHuskies.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. So as we continue on here on today's Locked On Huskies, I really want to talk about a couple defensive names that maybe you've heard them, maybe you haven't. I feel like I've mentioned at least one or two of these guys on the show here. The first one is 3-star edge rusher Tye Tautolo from Lake Stevens. This is a dude I'm very, very interested in. I was told that he's going to be taking an unofficial visit to Washington this weekend. And this guy at 6'5", 240 pounds, I absolutely love what he brings to the table. I think he's a very raw pass rusher, but at that kind of size, being a local kid, I think that he's someone who is certainly going to pick up a lot of steam. When you go check out his ranking over the 247 Sports Composite, he's ranked as the number 5 player in the state and doesn't look like he's all that far off from being a 4-star player. And I think that's, beside the point where we talk about the ratings, what they mean, what they might not mean, whatever, all the time. But I think that's just, again, a nice base mark for some of these kids with how hard they work. And again, with all of the raw talent that he has as an athlete, he's big, he's long, he's got a really nice motor. I think all of that is very, very important. And then you look through his offer list with 13 of them. Oregon, Texas A&M are a couple that really stand out to me when you go through it. And I think that this is one of those guys where you everydayers know it. We talked about it on yesterday's show. As you continue to try to build out the defensive line class, I am of the belief that you need to take at least 5 guys. And if 2 of them are edge rushers, which with what you might lose the position going into the 2027 season, that's great. I think that Tye Tautolo is someone who we talked about. Troy Milo yesterday, the 3-star edge rusher from Colorado, who another guy at 6'3", 238 pounds, is big and long, has the size that you're looking for to play that wide 9 outside linebacker sort of role in this defense. I think that Tye Tautolo also fits that very, very well. And as his recruitment continues on, if he's someone who continues to rise to the ranks from Lake Stevens High School and just pick up more offers and get that 4-star, whatever else, I think it's very important to note how early Washington got in on his recruitment. And as they continue to try to make a push for him, he's someone who I not only think is very gettable for this coaching staff, but being an in-state guy, being able to lock down a pass rushing talent in-state just like that maybe you trust your development. That guy takes a year, maybe 2 to get on the field. I just love the long-term outlook for what he can bring to Washington. So that's a name I'm certainly going to be watching. A newer name who's also going to be on campus this weekend is 6'4", 235-pound linebacker Titus Osterman. This is a guy who I was very intrigued because I honestly hadn't thought much about him in terms of the linebacker classes, where I look at Ethan and Justin Coach, who we talked about on a show the other day, Josiah Ployer, the 3 dudes from St. John Bosco. And then there's also Leo Falamoli from IMG Academy, a couple other guys who Washington are really high on at linebacker. But then you go and you watch Titus Osterman's film and it's, oh yeah, okay, this guy can absolutely play. 6'4", again, 235 pounds, a big, long kid who really fits the mold of what Brian Odom is looking for at inside linebacker as this UW coaching staff continues to emphasize adding size and adding length to the front seven. He's someone who not only can line up at inside linebacker, but he can also probably move that outside linebacker spot and give you a little bit of versatility depending on what the front is, depending on the look. And that's something we're going to see a lot more of this year as this linebacker room starts to just kind of build out that mold, where we know Jacob Manu is going to be a pure inside linebacker kind of guy. But you look at some of the other guys that could see the field this year in Ramzak Fruin, being just the main example of someone who could be, because we know Zadris Renisale is going to be in the rotation. We know that Avery Alexander is going to be in the rotation. I'm just curious to see who that 4th guy might be if Budal Lukta is not healthy, and it could be Ramzak Fruin, could be Isaiah Tokyo, could be Donovan Robinson, where that's certainly something that's going to be worked out during spring and fall camp. But I bring up all those names. Yes, it's the entire linebacker room, I know, but I bring up all those names because especially since Brian Odom has gotten here, we've seen him emphasize that size and that length in the middle of the field. And Titus Osterman, again, as the number 1 player in Idaho, he certainly checks all of those boxes that you're looking for. He's a really sure tackler on film. He is a very smooth mover. I was very impressed watching him play tight end as well, because he just kind of glides out of his stance, and he doesn't necessarily look as big and strong as he is. And then, he'll put a spin move on a guy, or he'll truck through somebody when he's got the ball in his hand and says, oh yeah, no, this kid is big and strong and can absolutely move. And I love seeing that, because it doesn't just emphasize the versatility, all these other different things, but being as good of an athlete as he is, we know that these are all things that Washington just wants to see continue to improve at this position. And when you have some super high-end dudes that are already going to be doing that at a high level in Zadris Renisale, in Ramzak Fruin, I think it's nice to just continue to see Washington just adding to that. And I'm curious to see what his recruitment might look like too, because this is someone who, as of this moment, is not necessarily the hottest commodity. I don't mean that as a slight. He's only got 3 offers: UW, Washington State, and Utah State. Seems like Cal, Utah have been a couple of the teams that are trying to get in the mix for his services as well. But Washington has a major opportunity. And if they look at him and they say, okay, yeah, this is a guy we want to lock up quickly, I feel like they're going to have a great opportunity to do that, because Brian Odom went and took an in-home visit with him earlier in the week. And now getting him back out to Seattle is certainly a nice win. And as this coaching staff continues to just kind of look at the linebacker position as a whole, they want to take 2-3 guys. I wouldn't be overly shocked, because you're going to be losing Jacob Manu. You're going to lose an Avery Alexander, and you might want to just add some more depth back to that room in the 2027 class. And I think that getting a guy like Titus Osterman would be a great way to do it. Now, let's talk some more defensive line, because I want to talk about him before we let up into just talking about California. A friend of mine pointed him out to me again today in a list of guys that he was certainly very interested in seeing at Washington. And I was like, oh yeah, no, this guy's a really good player. I remember watching his film after he got offered when he came up for an unofficial visit. And it's Sione Falila from Oaks Hills High School down in Southern California. This is a dude where a little undersized in terms of the listing right now at 6'2", 265 pounds. But he's someone, when you watch his film, his first step at defensive tackle is absolutely electric. I think he's a lot of fun to watch. And this is another guy who, as of right now, in terms of offers, is flying a little bit under the radar. He's got 7 right now: Oregon, UCLA, Utah, BYU standing out as a couple of the top ones right now. But this is someone who I really like as a supplementary depth take in Washington's class, because we've talked about some of these high-end targets that Washington is after in John Ioane, Tavita Nono being the top names on the interior at the very least. And if you can add a guy like Sione Falila to that, and you can get him up to 290, 295 pounds, somewhere in that ballpark, and keep that athleticism, that first step, and that violence that he plays with, I think that he is someone who could be a really fun difference maker in the Big Ten and at the college level. And we know that Washington just needs to keep adding high-end defensive linemen however they can get them. And this is, again, just somebody in that mold who I feel like fits all the different descriptors, all the boxes that you want to check for what the Huskies are looking for in someone who can get after the quarterback, because that's the biggest thing that I just want to see some of these defensive tackles be able to do. And when I look at the 26 class, I absolutely believe that T.I. Umukais can do that. And then looking forward to 2027, I think that there are some high-end guys like John Ioane, like Tavita Nonu, who can certainly do that as well. And if you want to be able to have a little bit of a deeper rotation and bring some of these guys in as pure pass rushers from time to time, I think Sione Falila is a tremendous name to fall into that boat as well. And I'm just curious to see how this defensive staff is going to treat this class, because I think that they're going to have an opportunity with several high-end guys. And like Falila, that's going to start in the state of California. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at Mazda. This is Mazda's Moving the Game Forward for those who show there's more to the score than what's on screen. And one person who's absolutely done a whole lot of that lately is Zoom Diallo. This is a guy who has just taken a massive step forward in his sophomore season. He's second on Washington in scoring right now. And just everything that he's done, it's not even just the fact that he's improved his range and become a more consistent three-point shooter, but the fact that he has just become so much more under control in that short to mid-range game. I love what he's able to do on the offensive end of the floor, and with Desmond Claude going down, and with Wesley Yates also missing about a month with the surgery that he had on his wrist. Having Zoom Diallo to just kind of fill that void, especially in a scoring perspective, has been critical for this Husky team and Danny Sprinkle. These remind us of what it really takes to raise the bar. It's that extra work off the court, dialing in every detail and giving it that extra fire, that grit and I never quit mentality. We put that same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. California has always been a building block, a cornerstone for Washington on the recruiting trail. And they did such a nice job in the state in the 2026 class, where you're able to get 7 signees in the 2026 class from the state of California. 5 of them were in the top 40. And that includes 5-star offensive tackle Cody Green, 4-star defensive lineman J.D. Hill, 4-star running back Brian Bonner, 4-star cornerbacks Rajon Duncan, and Jaron Jones. That's a really solid group of guys when you look at just what Washington is expecting to lean on, just kind of moving forward. All of those guys are major building blocks for what Jedd Fisch wants to do. And as I look at the 2027 class, now that Washington's got 3 commits in the boat, in 2 from the state of Washington, in Braylon Pope and Maurice Williams, and 1 from the state of Arizona in Zarek Sidney, you look at California and you say, okay, who's going to be next? Who are you going after? And Washington has done a great job putting themselves in a prime position with several of the state's top players, where, we mentioned a few of them earlier, right? John Ioane, the 4-star defensive tackle, 4-star offensive lineman Lincoln Maggio. And then there are several others where I know I listed off a whole bunch of names on my little note card here that I wanted to make sure I talked about. And even this is not going to be all of them. So we talked about Sione Falila a little while ago, 4-star cornerback Evan Mack, 4-star defensive lineman Cassie Curry being another one where he seemed to really enjoy his trip to Washington last fall for a game day. And if the Huskies are able to get him back up, I really like where they stand with him. That I feel like Washington is a major sleeper in his recruitment right now. And then I look at 4-star safety Gavin Williams, top 100 player. 4-star safety Isala Eso Iliava, who's held a crystal ball from rivals Adam Gorney to choose the Huskies for a long time. 3 other guys at St. John Bosco, the 3 linebackers, and Ethan and Justin Coach and Josiah Poyer. All of those guys. And again, there are several others who I didn't name. I'm just going to sit here listing names the whole time. I just wanted to let you know about some of those top targets and just remind you how important California is to Washington in this recruiting cycle. Because if the Huskies can go out and sign a similar class where it's 5 in the top 40, I feel like that's a really nice win where obviously you can look at it a little bit later on and say, okay, did you address this need? Did you address that need? And kind of go from there. But I feel like it's very, very possible with how Washington has developed their relationships and just made inroads in that state, especially when you look at modern day St. John Bosco, some of these bigger pipelines. This coaching staff has done a very good job of just building pipelines to Washington. That certainly goes back a long way when you just talk about the state of California and how it relates to Washington, right? But I look at how this coaching staff has been recruiting. Like Troy Bowens is another one who I absolutely just need to mention by name here, or I know some of you everydayers out there are going to yell at me for not saying it. But I look at all these guys and I feel like the more Washington continues to build relationships and get a little bit deeper into this 2027 classes, yes, there's a very, very long time before signing day. I know. But the earlier you can get in with some of these prospects and just build these relationships, the better you're going to be. And a lot of these guys did take trips to Washington over the course of, whether it be last spring, into the fall, maybe they were up for a camp over the summer. I think it's so important for Washington to continue building through California because we've talked about it a lot in recent weeks. Some of the, I don't want to say more outlandish, but just non-traditional places that Washington has gone where for tight end, Coach Jordan Paopao was visiting four-star tight end Anthony Cartwright in Detroit. Then he flies out to New Jersey. There's been some coaches in Minnesota over the last couple of days, and that's great. You want to see Washington continue expanding into those areas. And I'm not saying any of this to say that I believe they're neglecting the state of California or anything like that. No, but I just want to make it very, very clear that Washington is in a prime position to continue their dominance in the state of California. And if you can get 3 or 4 of the guys that I mentioned previously, I feel like that is going to put you in a really great spot as you, again, continue to try to expand your horizons and do different things with this class. And you pair that with some of the great players that you're in on in the state of Washington, in Arizona, in Colorado, and again, continuing to go further east. I'm just so curious to see how this is all going to work out, and just wanted to once again emphasize the importance of the state of California on the recruiting trail for Washington. But before we get out of here today, I need to talk some women's basketball with you guys, because if you haven't been keeping up with Coach Tina Langley and her team, this team has been tremendous. I'm so impressed. On Wednesday night, they went out to Maryland and pulled off an 83-80 victory over the Terps in double overtime. That's the number 16 Terps, by the way. Washington will now have to play a whole bunch more ranked and receiving votes teams over the next couple of weeks, with Ohio State at number 11 being the next ranked team on the docket. But I look at this team and it's so exciting to think about what they are going to be able to continue to do, because at this point, they're pretty close to a lock for March Madness, in my opinion, unless things go disastrously wrong here down the stretch. And a lot of that, especially in this last game against Maryland, is props to Sayvia Sellers. And we got to shout her out because she is the Locked On Podcast Network's player of the day for Thursday with 38 points. That's a career high, by the way, 6 assists, 4 rebounds. She has been absolutely tremendous throughout the season for Washington. And it's been great to see, because El Ladine, one of the major stars on this team, was out for a while in non-conference play due to an injury. And we've seen her scoring has come in waves, where in this game, she went 3 for 12 from the field, 10 points, 3 rebounds and an assist, which is all nice to see because she was a preseason All Big Ten honoree. And with the injury that kept her out for so long, it was kind of a question of, okay, who else is going to step up? And we've absolutely seen that in several regards. And one person who, last time we talked women's basketball here on the show, was coming off a National Player of the Week performance is USC transfer Avery Howell. And in this game, she stepped up yet again, put up another double-double, 17 points, 11 rebounds, and a career-high 5 steals. This is all absolutely awesome. And again, this is a team you need to buy into right now, because if this continues and they're able to pull off one more upset in terms of the rankings sort of victory in the last couple of games of the year here, I feel really good that this team can win a couple of games in March and make a run towards the Sweet 16, towards the Elite 8, because they just have that level of high-end talent between El Ladine, when she's at her best, Sayvia Sellers, and Avery Howell. That trio has been one of the best in the Big Ten this season. But one of the nicest things about how this team has continued to come together is, I don't want to say the emergence because this was expected, right? From 5-star freshman Bryn McGoy, she's been tremendous, where she's come off the bench. She hasn't made a start yet this season, where Yulia Grabowska, the Michigan transfer, has been an awesome, impactful force down low. She had 5 points and 8 rebounds in this game, but Bryn has been everything that she was billed to be coming over from Colfax, Washington, and then some. In this game, she struggled from the floor. She only had 4 points, but made up with that for 11 rebounds. And as she continues her career at Washington, this is someone that you should be very, very excited about because, we just talked about it with football, right? And it's always the same thing with men's basketball as well, where you look at some of the guys that they're after in the 2027 class. Keeping these high-end prospects close to home is absolutely critical. And seeing Bryn McGoy do that on the women's basketball side of things, again, with some big matchups coming up, including UCLA, this is a team that you need to buy stock in. Go buy some tickets. Go check out what they have going on because you're not going to be disappointed. I can tell you that much. But that's all we got for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. If you like what we have to offer here on Locked On Huskies, please make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure to click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please, if it's a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you on Monday.